All right, this is the second half of the copyright tutorial. In this one, we're going to make it be transparent. So it could be like a watermark, which makes it more subtle on your image. So if you really want people to know who you are, you might want that first simple basic one. But if you want to be a little fancy, we're going to both add a symbol and we're also going to make it transparent. So we're going to start out the same. Go to File, New, Blank File. And I'm going to use just the same setup I did. 800 pixels wide, 800 pixels high, transparent background. And this time I'm going to name it Transparent Frost. And that's good enough for me. You can name it anything you want. If you name it here, then you don't have to worry about remembering to name it later. And so we've got the name of the file. We have it at 800 pixels in both dimensions, and we have it with a transparent background. You're then ready to click OK. All right, at this point, we're going to go and I'm going to use my copyright text symbol. And again, you can learn how to find that on your computer by following the directions I gave you. If you've used my other tutorial, you know how to make a symbol that's a copyright. Well, I'm going to save that this time by making it from my keyboard. And because I'm using a Mac, it's very simple to do, but you can find it out from my directions. So I'm going to grab the T for text. I'm going to go down and make sure my font is bold enough. So if I go in and click, I have the old one I just used, Arial Black Regular. If I click it up, I can see how bold it is. If you want to play around, you can go through and look at these and find one that you think would work fine for you. We may all have slightly different examples here, but the only trick is it should be simple and be bold so that what we're going to do now has a way of really showing through. I'm going to stay with Arial Black Regular, and it's easy to click on the wrong font, so check to be sure you chose the Arial Black Regular or your own choice of a very thick black font. For this one, I don't want to create the font in black. Many of us have used 50% gray, and we know that it provides transparency. Anything you do on 50% gray is not visible on your document. So if I create a 50% gray copyright, the only way it will be visible is if I add texture or an outline to it. But the middle of those bold letters will stay transparent and you'll be able to see your image through them. So how do I get a transparent one? Well, the easiest one to do is to go to your foreground color picker, click on it, and go to the number where you see probably all zeros. If you type the gray, 50% gray code, which is 808080, you will have 50% gray. I could have gotten it also from the little color swatch in my option bar, but this will work for everybody. So once I've done that, I say OK, and now on my foreground color picker and on the little color swatch in the option bar for the text tool, it is 50% gray. This is what will make your copyright transparent and allow the image to show through it. So we've done that correctly, and now I've got to take the text tool and I'm going to click in the middle of this document, and I get to see right away how big this text happens to be. I want to play around with it, and I would rather have it a bit too small because I can always change that. When you put a document onto a copyright document onto a picture, you're in a transform mode and you can change that size without damaging the quality. So you can make it, I don't know how it appears in yours. Mine, I happen to have a size 11. 10 or 12 would work equally well. I want to be sure that the orientation here is centered. so that as I build the copyright, it's going to reach from the middle out to both edges equally. And I have actually said I want it even more bold than it was before. So I chose to create the faux bold. That means it adds boldness to it, but it's not built into the original font. But for my purpose, I can turn it off or I can turn it on. I'm going to have it turned on a little. And now I'm going to use the keyboard command for the copyright symbol. And in my case, it is Option G. So I have a copyright symbol at this size with the same font style as I've chosen. And then I'm going to type in the year, 2017, and then I'm going to put my name as I want it to appear. I've chosen to make it capital M, capital L, capital F, and a small R-O-S-T. And if I click off this with either the check mark in Elements or the return or enter key, I have completed a basic copyright symbol. Now, I'm going to have us add a little fun to this by adding a symbol that can be unique to your personality and put it on the end of the copyright. And so to do that, we need to go back over to the symbol tool. And if you worked the first tutorial with me, you found that. On Elements, it's in the Draw group. It looks like a slopey star, and it says Custom Shape Tool when I point to it. If you're in full Photoshop, look near the Hand tool, and you will find a Custom Shape Tool. Once I choose it, it will go back to the last thing I used. And on my computer, the last shape I used was a copyright. Well, I don't want the copyright symbol to represent me. So I'm going to click on the little triangle next to the symbol, and out will pop a window. And at the top, it tells me this is the symbols group. But if I pop open that group, look at all the shapes that I can use. And if you're a flower person, you could choose a flower. If you like food, you could choose something from the food group. Or fruit, if you're a fruit person. Or music. Nature. If you're an animal person, there are 2 animal groups, and I'm going to choose animals 1, because I happen to know if I scroll down on the animals, or up on the animals 1, I will find a fish. And you all know, as an underwater photographer, I'm a fish. So I'm choosing this, but you choose any symbol you want. And if you click it, it will appear in your option bar as the symbol you're going to use. And to draw it, you go up to your document, and I'm going to draw it away from my copyright so I can play with it. Somewhere up high, I'm going to hold down my mouse button, and I'm going to draw a fish. And it will also pick up the 50% gray, because that was the color in the foreground color picker. And then, if I wonder how big do I want it to be, I might want to put it in place at the end of my copyright to see if I like it at the end. It certainly isn't going to go in the beginning, I think. It wouldn't sound right to me. And again, I might say to you, if you had a real long name and you don't have any room at the end, you can go in and click on your copyright layer and go ahead and take your move tool and move that copyright somewhere else on the page. But I'm going to leave it as it is, and I'm going to grab my fish with the move tool, and I'm going to move him down and put him at the end of my file. And I can't move him in exactly with my mouse, so I'm going to use my arrow keys. I'm going to move him in a little closer to my name, and I think he's too high. The down arrow will bring him down till I like his position. Now, be aware, your symbol can be bigger than the height of your copyright, as long as the document, when we crop it, is big enough to include your symbol. The symbol can be bigger than your name, especially if you really want to make something special of it. So I've put it there, and when it's taken care of and it's ready to go, I have I'm going to go back over and simply click off it on my document. And I have now a document which has a text layer and it has a shape layer. And before I do anything else with that, I'm going to combine those layers. And if you did the other tutorial, you know it's very critical at this point. If I want to keep the transparency of this document, that I use a layers merge visible. It maintains the transparency. So it puts the two layers together so I can treat it all as my copyright. But I haven't lost the transparency either of the background or of my text and my creature. So the next thing we're going to do is say, if we could add texture to this, it would be a lot more obvious when we use it. Because remember, the fact that it's 50% gray means the gray won't show at all. The only thing that will make it show is whether we give it some style. It'll be a lot easier to see what we're doing if we zoom in on this so you can really see it. So if you went to the style setting and you don't have it zoomed in, cancel out of it and zoom in on your image till you think you can see it really well. I can see that and will be able to tell what I'm doing to it. Now I'm going to go back to Layer, Layer Style, Style Settings, and I'm going to choose Bevel. I'm going to move this window away so I can see my copyright. And you've already can see some three-dimensionality to here, but if you move the size part of the bevel control, you'll see it changes. And I don't like it down in some places. The smaller the pixel size is, the more it has changed yours. I am using it around 6 pixels and I see some nice pop to it. You'll notice that the default was direction in. Try direction down. Can you see that it's hollow? It looks like you've pressed it down in. That's okay also. I think I prefer direction up. And it's still, we could make it more obvious if we come down to the option to place a stroke around it. So if you click on stroke, I recommend that it be very, very tiny. The smallest stroke you can make is 1 pixel. And I don't want an overly obvious stroke. So I am going to put 1 pixel for size. And the position is outside, which is a good place for it to be. And the opacity of this stroke, I'm going to lower it because, remember, I'm looking for a watermark. So I don't want the outline to be very, very intense. So instead, I'm going to lower the opacity of that stroke to somewhere like maybe 50%. That means that the stroke won't be too harsh. I want you to notice that what we've added in the way of a stroke is not 50% gray. It is a black stroke. So it won't be transparent. And therefore, if I make it lower opacity, it will be there and will help to define my copyright, but it won't be too harsh. So I have that done, and those are the only two that I normally use. And I'm going to say OK. I want you to know, if you're in Elements, up in your Layers panel, you have a thing called Styles. And in Styles, you have lots of different styles you could add to this one. There's a button style, and you could go in and get really fancy and play around. But we just simply used one from the Layer Style Settings menu. So we've done that. Now we're ready to crop this into a size that's more appropriate for the copyright. So grab your crop tool. Make sure it has no width or height, and if you're in Elements, just cancel out of that silly box. And now you've got the crop tool, and I'm going to start out and crop big enough to completely have my whole thing there. Since the outside is transparent, it really doesn't matter how big you leave it. So, you know, you don't have to be fussy about being just bigger than your thing. I kind of like not to have it overly large, but make it big enough that it doesn't crop off anything there. And then accept it with Return, Enter, or the green check mark. we now have a transparent one, and to keep it transparent, we're going to save it as a PNG file. So if you will go File, Save As, name it if you haven't named it something. I gave it a name which will work, but you can rename it. Look at where it's going. I want it to go not into the practice images folder, but I wanted it to go on the top level of the Saturday class folder. But when you're doing this tutorial, you choose your own spot. You might store it in a document file or on the desktop. Ultimately, the desktop is a good place to find it in a hurry when you want to use it. So I've done that, and the third thing is critical. Where it says Format on your window, we've got to change that format to PNG. Otherwise, you will lose the transparency of the file. So let's double check. You've named it something appropriate for you. You've decided where to store it, and you've made it a PNG format, so you're ready to click Save. And I have these both set to none because I don't need to compress this. It's a very small file. And so it's done. If you did the other tutorial, we closed this file and we reopened it to assure ourselves it will open after it's closed. But you don't need to have that proven. So let's try and see what happens when we use it. So I'm going to suggest you open any image you want. Or if you're working with my files for my class, I'm going to open the Coral Garden image. But you can use the same one if you want to follow my lesson exactly. If you got this video and you didn't get the files for July 8th, you can go back to me and ask for the files, and you'll have all the PDF files and things that you see in front of you. So I'm going to go Open. And I'm going to pull it down so I can see both the image and the copyright file. So when I move this copyright file down onto my image, to make it truly transparent, I'm going to change the blend mode of that layer. So don't expect it immediately. So you need the Move tool. You need to grab something that is got color to it. I'm going to grab my crazy fish. He's easy to grab. And I'm going to, the first thing I do selects him, and the second thing moves him. And I'm going to move this guy down and let go. And when I let go, he is in the picture where I dragged him, and I can move him down, and I could resize him, but you really want to see what happens when we make him truly transparent. So go up to your layers panel, and you're on the layer that you just added. Go up to the normal blend mode. Come down to overlay. And guess what? You have a watermark that probably wouldn't even be visible if you hadn't put both a bevel and a stroke around it. But the magic is, what would happen if you put it over the pink hard coral? Grab it, move it up over the pink hard coral, and guess what? What shows through is the pink hard coral. Let's move it over to the black. Oh, if you don't grab it correctly and you grab the space, it won't come. So here I have black showing through, and the only reason anything shows is there is a bevel on it. So I'm going to grab it again, and you have to grab the actual one. I'm going to come down here and put it back here. Now, if you do it the way we did it, you don't need to reduce the opacity of this. The only reason I might reduce the opacity is if I had chosen a stroke that was too thick. If I had a 3 or 4 pixel stroke, it might be too obvious down here, in which case I could reduce the opacity and that stroke would get less dramatic. But the idea of creating a transparent one is it takes on the color of the place in the image where you place it. And why don't we, while we're here, open another file with different colors. So I'm going to go back to File, Open, and I'm working from the lesson. So I have all these team pictures, I'm going to grab one of the team pictures. The team Banff Brigade 0601, and I'm going to open it. All right, what would happen in this very different looking image if I took the same transparent copyright and put it on this image? So come back to the file that has the transparent and grab your move tool, grab a hold of the text or the object and move it down over to here and let go. I want you to notice something. It's very small. And those who've taken my classes know the reason probably is that the resolution of each of these files is different. The trick about text and images is that images are built out of pixels and text is made out of points, and they are not the same. So if your image has a different resolution, the absolute same file of your copyright will come in at a different size. And so if I want this bigger, you know I have to grab the corner, which is the diagonal arrow, and I have to drag it out and make it bigger. So if it came very small, it would if you're using the picture I'm using, and you want it bigger, you just stretch the corners and make it bigger. And then if you're wondering, why isn't it transparent? It's because that layer is normal. If you can go and make that layer overlay, you now have a watermark which shows the pinkish color of the pavement. If I grab it and move it up on top of the truck, the background is white. And the only reason it's visible is because of the bevel and the stroke. Otherwise, that you would not see that transparent, those characters at all. So when you do a 50% gray text, it must have at least a stroke, and a bevel helps also. Then it will stand out. So let's just peek it around and see what happens if I put it over the green of the trees. Can you see that the font now is green as what shows through? Let me bring it down to the sidewalk, and it picks up the sidewalk color. It's too big to completely cover her shirt, but if I drag it on top of the shirt, the part that the shirt is behind is purple, and the part that the truck is behind is white. And if I bring it back down to the pavement, that's what shows through. And once again, if you chose a style that is neat and not overly done, you don't have to lower the opacity. But if you got kind of greedy and you made your stroke 4 or 5 or 6 pixels, it's going to be so dark that it isn't going to look transparent. Don't have to redo the whole thing. You could simply go in and lower the opacity slider on this layer, and you would lighten that whole thing. I'm lightening the part that I added that is not the text. So you see my stroke I added is getting lighter. Well, it's only 1 pixel, so it doesn't really need to be lighter. So I'm leaving mine at 100%. But it's important for you to know that you can take care of it and do that. So then I'm satisfied with where it is. I have to use either the green check in Elements or the Enter or Return key in full Photoshop, and I have placed it. And if this was my own image, I would go Save As, and I would be sure it's sized correctly for the internet. And then when I save it now, I want to give it a name appropriate for the fact that I know it has its copyright on it and it's ready to be uploaded to the internet. And let me remind you again that I will not put this with my visible copyright anywhere where I think people are going to print it. So for the Ride for Roswell, we donate our pictures. And if somebody finds themselves in one of our pictures, they can download it and print a 4x6 print. And I don't want them to see my copyright on front. So be judicious about your use of copyright. But if you're sharing images and you don't want anyone to borrow them and you want them to know that you in fact own it, there's nothing legal about these copyrights, but they do notify somebody this is not in public domain. this is my possession, and I've marked it that way. I think that handles this.